I didn't bring it, and I'm okay. It's gonna be right.
We were talking off camera. If you just joined us, the hair and the chapstick is missing, so we're a mess over here. I'm just kidding. But hey, how's everyone doing? Happy Wednesday. It is June 18th. Early in the morning over here. I know for you guys have had a day. I had like a client before this, woke up, so early morning. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are here at the IOCDF every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern. It is the Ask the Experts live streams where we are bringing you experts in certain parts of the field. Obviously OCD, and some people have specialties. And so just basically coming here to offer a sense of community, to answer your questions, to offer support, resources. And just the way that I look at it, if I was still struggling with OCD, it'd be nice to have a place to go for an hour every Wednesday just to meet other people with OCD, to talk to other people that are going through it, to get questions answered from clinicians and just get support. So thank you so much for coming on by on this lovely Wednesday. Before I introduce my guests and talk about what we're going to do today, the agenda, always a reminder, we're having people from all different streams. So one thing somebody was asking me is they're like, hey, I don't always see the questions you ask. I don't know if it shows up on all platforms. We see all the questions from all platforms. So we're live streaming on Facebook, on Twitch, on iocdf.org/live, IOCDF YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter or X, never know what to call it, but just happy to see folks from all over, international and national folks. So remember, when you're talking, when you're chatting, these are all people that have come to tune into this live stream and have a lot in common with you. So say hi, talk to people. And lastly, this is your live stream. Remember, there are questions or comments that you can put in whatever platform you're on. There's a chat module, so you can definitely put in any questions or any comments you have for the panelists or for other people watching. Also, remember, this is not to replace therapy. So if you're looking for a clinician, make sure go to iocdf.org/find-help. If you are in crisis, this is also not a crisis support. So we're here to offer you, like I said, community support and resources. But if you need actual support, please go to 988lifeline.org, dial 988. You can call your clinician, go to a local emergency room, or call 988, get help, right? We want you to be supported through difficult times. We just can't do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today's live stream and then introduce the guests. As you may know, here in the United States, I don't know if it's global, but in the United States, June is Pride Month. It's where we celebrate and we recognize people of the LGBT community. And it's important to talk about it in this space. Some people may say, wait, what does that have to do with OCD? But I know that Caitlin Pinciotti, shout out to her, and others have produced some papers that have shown, like, in residential research, in residential settings, there's a high population of queer youth and queer adults getting OCD treatment. So we know there's a lot of queer individuals with OCD, but also mental health is important. And so if we don't support all people in our community, it really suffers. We're also going to talk a little bit about the unique challenges people in the LGBT community face when getting OCD and mental health treatment. After we talk maybe for about 20 minutes about this topic, we're going to open it up to you, to comments, to questions. If you have questions about Pride Month or questions about anything we discussed, please ask those away. If you have a general OCD question, I'm surrounded by two licensed clinicians who are more than happy and more than qualified to answer OCD-related questions. So general questions, questions on Pride, anything you want to ask us, we're here for you. Real quick, I do want to introduce my two guests. So the first guest that I have is Sam Greenblatt. Dr. Sam Greenblatt is a clinical psychologist who has specialized in the treatment of OCD his entire career. As someone with OCD himself, Sam understands deeply the struggle of dealing with intrusive thoughts and the intense distress that comes with it. Sam uses his intimate understanding of OCD paired with his expert knowledge of research and treatment of the disorder to provide the best possible care for his patients. His subspecialties include the treatment of treatment-resistant OCD, as well as folks in queer communities. Sam is the director of OCD and anxiety specialists in New York City and the co-president of the IOCDF's LGBTQIA+ special interest group. And I know you've been on the OCD Stories a bunch of times too, so there's a bunch of episodes they could listen to. But welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Very excited to get to talking.
Yes. And then, of course, we have Tracy Ibrahim, who is an LMFT and a certified sex therapist, which we're going to be talking about at the conference. If you go, we're going to have an OCD and sex talk with 20 plus years experience providing mental health services in multiple settings. Her specializations include OCD, anxiety-related disorders, depression, and issues related to sexual health and functioning. Her expertise has been utilized to create high-quality programs addressing the increasing need for evidence-based treatments. Currently serving as the Chief Compliance Officer for NoCD, she focuses on creating and implementing evidence-based treatment and compliance programs. Her deep passion for evidence-based treatment and advocacy work stems from managing her own OCD for over 40 years and raising children with OCD, anxiety, neurodiversity, and being part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's like the one most amazing thing I'm doing today, actually. Thanks for having me here.
I'm sure you're doing a bunch of amazing things. I just realized we all three have OCD. Like, I kind of already knew that, obviously, but it's always cool to have people that I always call us like both sides of the couch. Like, at one point we were getting treatment on one side and now we jumped to the other side. We loved it so much. We were like, hey, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So
It's true.
Sometimes both sides of the couch at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes, yeah, you're like doing it and then you're like, actually, I need help, and you jump to the other side. So, before I jump into pride questions, one thing I always like to ask people with OCD, we get this question a lot, like, what is your personal or clinical or both definition of recovery? Because I think people ask that a lot, like, is there a cure? And so when they see people that treat OCD who, sorry, my light is being difficult. When they see people that are like both of you, right? Like, both of you are thriving in your careers, you're doing all this work to help people and help clients. So what, I'll let whoever wants to jump in first, but what is kind of your definition personally and or clinically, or it may be both, of what getting better from OCD looks like, and what terminology do you use?
Can I ask you a question first back in terms of how detailed of an answer are you because like a lot of these things I could yap for a while about. Are we looking for like a minute answer or 5 minute? Like what?
Yeah, well, like for me, for instance, I'll just give you guys my answer, then that might guide you. A lot of people will always ask me that question when I speak. They're always like, are you cured from OCD? And I think that's a hard answer because some of the components of OCD are things that other people without OCD share. We just have it to a level of intensity and disorder. But the way that I kind of define what I'm aiming for in my own life and for my clients' life is where OCD no longer controls any of their decision making. There's no avoidances or action plans in a day because of OCD. Additionally, the thoughts are easily passed on by, and you have days and patches of no real thoughts or urges to do behaviors. So suddenly OCD goes from like the top of the most important, difficult thing in your life to somewhere under the bottom. And I always joke that taxes and traffic stress me out way more than OCD on a daily basis.
Facts.
I think that that's a great definition. I'd agree with all of that. I think, I guess what I'd add is another useful way of like measuring kind of the presence of OCD that I break it down with is intensity, frequency, and duration of OCD symptoms. So in addition to everything that you're saying, that the bread and butter of like OCD treatment is learning to ascribe a relevance to the OCD and to kind of just let it be there. There are some aspects of it that we have more direct control over reducing. The intensity of OCD definitely should die down once you go through therapy for it, because when you're compulsing, that's really what ramps up the intensity. So if you learn to stop compulsing, you will experience less frequent intense moments that really should be expected. In terms of duration of OCD symptoms, like how long you're stuck in an OCD loop, that also kind of should be guaranteed by therapy. Like you learn to stop compulsing and things die down a little faster. But the frequency, like the amount of intrusive thoughts that you experience in a day, that is less directly related to treatment, and there's a little more variance. I think what I experience in working with clients is sometimes there's kind of a delayed reaction where if you're skillful for a few weeks, the frequency starts to die down a little after the intensity and the duration dies down. But that could pop up every now and then. You could have a flare up. You get a new job, you get married or something like that. Like different life changes and stressors can bring it about. That there's a lot of variance in that. But the other two things, treatment really should have a pretty direct relationship to.
Well said. I love that. How about for you, Tracy?
Yeah, I will double down on all the things that everyone said. Plus, I will raise you with my own. I'm just kidding. I don't even play poker, so I'm not even sure what all that means. But I heard it before. So for me, it looks like living a recovery lifestyle. So I got better using ERP therapy. I use it in my day-to-day life. And I think, like we said, what does recovery look like? It's not, it's not curable. You're not going to never have an intrusion again for the rest of your life, probably. I mean, I don't know about your life, but like if you have OCD, probably you're going to get at least one or more intrusions between now and whatever you're not here anymore. So for me, kind of like what Sam was talking about here is exactly that. I have what I like to think of as unpleasant, or I don't label it as unpleasant, but what I'll say is I didn't sign up for when you walk in an elevator and there's elevator music that you don't enjoy. I consider OCD sort of my background music, only I don't really enjoy or not enjoy it. For me, it's all about neutralizing that it doesn't mean anything, but just recognizing that as I walk around, especially, all my themes are going off. I have what I would say high frequency. I don't even know the last time I've gone 30 minutes without an intrusive thought, right? It's, you're going to throw yourself out the window. You're going to whatever, you just touched something poopy, is this happening? Is that whatever? And it's like, I just don't respond anymore. So that's what that looks like. And I like to one up my OCD. I like to haunt my OCD themes, even the ones that aren't haunting me, because I find it to be more preventative, if you will. Preventative meaning helps insulate me from that. So like my contamination OCD, when something falls on the floor, I tend to pick it up and put it in my mouth if it's like a snack. Things like that. Nobody has to do that. That's just part of my recovery. That's just sort of like how I roll. And even though I may not get any thoughts like, oh my gosh, you're eating dog hair, or this is happening, it's still, for me, it's just, that used to be, floors are such a trigger and used to be so much of my compulsions that like, I just do it. I sit on the floor, even though I don't want to. I don't wash my hands, even though I really feel like it. I stand on balconies while thinking about the fact that, my suicidal OCD is telling me to jump off the balcony. And so that's what it looks like. And I love humor. I add humor because it works as something called cognitive diffusion, and it can help break it up, because OCD is never funny. It's never come at you and been like, ha ha, I have a funny tale for you of joy and good luck. It's always awful. So I like to turn it around and be like, oh my gosh, I love that for me. Let me change my outfit before I jump off the balcony, because I don't want to go out wearing like, an ugly shirt. So this is not my ugly shirt. I would totally go out in this shirt.
Sam, to throw it back at you, something that Tracy said, what are, Tracy was talking about like humor and kind of pushing back on it for you personally, or something that you talk to clients about. Is there something specific that you like to use to kind of diffuse the OCD or push back that is outside of kind of like the typical ERP discussion that you find really helpful?
It's a useful question. I think more recently, like the last 2 years, my conceptualization has shifted a little bit to, and this is not necessarily true for everyone's OCD, but I could answer that question from a personal lens, that understanding there is oftentimes a reason that I have more energy that then gets translated to OCD. So unlike Tracy, who's saying that, she goes not 30 minutes without an intrusive thought, my brain is in some ways a little more like gentle to me, and my OCD is the type now in remission or what have you, where it'll just kind of flare up every now and then, but I will go days, sometimes, weeks without OCD experiences. And when it does pop up, there's usually something that's in my life that's not like directly related to the fear, right? But there might be something in my life that I'm not fully processing, that's I'm seizing up a little about, that has me on edge, and understanding what emotions I might be suppressing, understanding what I'm like wrestling with and seeking to process, oftentimes has been helpful in kind of dispelling that energy and therefore reducing some OCD symptoms.
I like that. One thing that worked for me, I saw it on like a skit or something, but I've always used it, is it was talking about like having to deal with family members you don't like on Thanksgiving. And the gentleman was saying like one of the things I like to do is I have an aunt that like believes in all different types of conspiracy theories, and we always kind of argue with her, and she always like goes back and forth, and it ruins Thanksgiving. So this year I'm gonna like out crazy my crazy aunt. So when my aunt says I don't believe that the moon landing is real, I'm gonna turn and look at her and say, you are such a sheep. I can't believe you even believe the moon is real. It's just a projection from the deep state. And so I always think about that as like, I want to out conspiracy theory OCD, because OCD really is conspiracy theories if you think about it. Like for me, one of the intrusive thoughts I used to get is I hated waiting at crosswalks and it was crowded, because I always thought I was going to like push someone in the middle of the street. So that's a conspiracy theory, right? I don't have a history of that. There's no want to do that. My brain just says that. And so it's like, well, what if I push all of them and I take them and I lay them all down, and then I push someone out of their car, and then it's me who just goes back and forth over people. And then by making it so inflated, it felt like a balloon that popped, and then it was just silly. And then I was like, yeah, you know what? My brain thinks it's helping me out. It thinks it's trying to protect me from something, but there's nothing there. It's a conspiracy theory. I don't have to buy into every conspiracy theory my brain says. And once I had that diffusion, like, hey, my brain is giving me a suggestion that I get to run with or not, it put me back in power. And I'm like, I don't want a back and forth dialogue for the next 2 hours about this thought. I had a thought, great, I'm so happy for me, but I have other things to do today. So I always like to hear from people with OCD, like, what are these little kind of tricks that maybe you found work for you? Delay was a big one for me. I knew if I just kept moving on, that whatever I thought was going to be the end of the world, in 20 minutes, it was no longer an issue. So I trusted my body's cool down system. So I think things like that are just always nice to hear. So thank you for indulging me in that. I always learn new tricks. I want to throw up on the bottom of the chat from Terry Blessings, who says, happy Pride. What I wanted to say to you, or to ask both of you is, you know, as clinicians, it is so important that every single person that walks into our rooms gets the best possible care that they can receive. And obviously, each person has unique identities and aspects of themselves that offer different challenge. So for your LGBTQIA plus clients, what are some unique challenges that you see that you have to kind of overcome in therapy? And why is Pride like a good moment for everybody to just like embrace the community? So like, I'll throw out real quick, like obviously, you know, the news and the topics of the day really influence people's OCD. And so a lot of my clients, obviously, especially the youth in the queer community, will hear the things being said about their community, and that's what they start to obsess about. And it turns into like media searching, avoidances, really low mood. So what are some unique challenges you see with working with LGBTQIA plus clients in the OCD and mental health space?
Yeah, I'll start that. So for me, I think it's the balancing of how much things that we can do that are in our control and how many things we can do that are out of our control, because so much of OCD has to do with uncertainty. And so much of reality has to do with uncertainty. And on top of that uncertainty, we have facts, but we don't always know outcomes. And so I think I've been doing a whole lot of holding a safe space, acknowledging the parts that maybe OCD is latching onto, but also are real, which OCD does because it's a jerk, likes to, you know, attach to trauma and things that suck that are happening for your life, and good things. So doing a lot of that and saying like, well, you know, what can we do about certain things and what don't we need to do on other things? You know, do we need to delete everything that we've ever put online? These are the kinds of things that, you know, do I need to not advertise myself as diverse positive? Things of that nature. And then being able to explore values and learning the best way for each individual to explore their values and share their values in a way that's meaningful for them, because not everybody advocates in the same way, and the most important advocacy is for yourself. And so, just because I'm okay going out and being loud about it and dealing with whatever backlash I get from that doesn't mean that that's what people have to do or supposed to do. So helping people really find that space for themselves to turn a lot of that energy into something productive, but also something acknowledging the facts about what's scary right now.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. How about for you, Sam?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of like unique things that I find affects that intersection of groups like LGBTQIA plus and OCD, I find that a lot of these folks, like we grow up with a increased awareness of how having like the wrong sexuality or gender could negatively impact our lives, right? And because of that, when we develop OCD and our brain has a broken alarm system and is looking for justification as to why it's going off, I found that in queer populations, there's maybe an increased chance that those themes will touch upon something, again, quote unquote, being wrong around like sexuality or gender, right? So then there's some rates of, and there's narratives in society around this too, right? Like gay men and the obviously untrue and harmful narrative of increased rates of pedophilia, right? So within these populations, there can be increased rates of things like POCD or relationship OCD or sexual orientation OCD or gender identity OCD, because, folks have grown up with this awareness of these things being a threat and not being in that privileged position of cisgender heterosexual folks, of not really needing to kind of consider or have that heightened awareness of their own sexuality and gender. So I've also found that working through these themes and folding in kind of the environmental factors that might have kind of influenced their brains to be fearfully searching around these topics has also been kind of a helpful way of distancing oneself from the validity of those themes, being able to understand, not just have the standard OCD narrative of my brain makes silly thoughts, but also my brain makes silly thoughts, and part of the manifestation of the silly thoughts is because of how society is unjust and shitty, and it's kind of attached to some of those kind of things.
Yeah, no, exactly. You were talking about like the higher rates. One of the thoughts that I had is like, why pride and advocacy is so important. I remember early on the conversations about OCD themes and, sexual orientation OCD, which back then used to be called homosexuality OCD, but that was really kind of put in this like group of like taboo thoughts, right? So when you go to conferences or you'd read papers or you'd read, treatment manuals for OCD, it would say, clients may have taboo thoughts like, pedophilia OCD or harm OCD or sexual intrusive thoughts or harming animals, harming children, and being, queer or gay or, etc. And I was always just like, wait, why is that paired together? Like we do that unfortunately, in groups of people do that in like the real world. Like, why are we doing that in the mental health space? What kind of messaging is that sending people attending these conferences, reading these books, or in this community that are queer, and they're like, wow, like my identity is something that people are so against. And I think also the way that when you talk about that being as like taboo, the client who may be, let's say they do identify as straight, then suddenly like they're getting the messaging like this thing you're worried about is like scary and wrong. And it's like, if we just kind of like normalize and calm it down, I think we start to realize like, hey, it allowed us to treat any identity better, because we recognize a lot of times sexual orientation OCD has no correlation with someone's sexual orientation. It's really just about this idea of like, I got to figure it out. I have to have 100% certainty. I have to be able to like be like shut the case and have this proclamation and move on. And that's really what it's about, is like needing to change identity or not being sure of identity, and treating that more core fear is going to help somebody get better, way better than trying to like jump around about sexual orientation and taboo. So I think understanding themes and the progression I've seen us make as a field is actually providing better care for all people, straight, gay, wherever they land on their sexual orientation and gender identity.
Yeah, and even the language we use, like you mentioned, things used to be called HOCD, and it's like, hey, that's offensive, so let's not do that. Let's have a more or there were things, whatever it is. Now it's like, there's gender identity OCD and there's sexual orientation OCD, and it just means your thing is flaring up about that. But I always like to point out to everyone, OCD is just OCD. It flares people up sometimes, but they're like, no, this one's worse. It's like, actually, if you were to get a picture of it in your brain, OCD is OCD. The theme is just the thing that is relevant to you and your experience of OCD. So I like to put that out there. There's not a worse OCD than the next person. My contamination OCD bothers me more than my suicidal and harm OCD. I would rather have intrusive thoughts about, pushing my daughter down the stairs than the struggle of going through a public restroom with invisible poop germs any day. And that's just an example. So.
Well, what I like about that is what I always tell clients, because I run support groups, and a lot of times, like when I see that client from a group, like an individual session, they'll always say that. They'll say like, God, I wish I had that OCD. It seems so much easier. And I always say, because it's not relevant to you. But right. Each subtype has its own unique challenges. So contamination, for instance, is very difficult because most of the contamination fears are invisible or a feeling. And it also can have people take hours of their day, having harm OCD or sexual intrusive thoughts that really affects somebody's belief about themselves. They have a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. There's a lot of difficulty in existentialism OCD and scrupulosity because you're never going to really get the answer you want, right? God's not going to come down and answer questions, or you're not going to discover like if you're here or why you're here. So each has a unique challenge. And I just say they all suck. Like they all equally suck. They just have these unique challenges. Or like you pointed out, Tracy, like each of them may affect somebody different. But I also like what you said about OCD is OCD. How do you both conceptualize OCD, either with your clients or for yourself? Because like you said, Sam, I feel like over the years, my conceptualization and understanding of how OCD affects people has kind of changed. I used to think of it like bully, and now it's like, no, it's just this overzealous bodyguard that thinks it's protecting you, but is actually causing more harm than good.
I mean, the way that I boil it down is it's an intolerance of uncertainty, right? Or if you want to be even more kind of minute around that phrasing, an intolerance of an awareness of uncertainty, because everything is uncertain, right? Like all three of us might die by the end of this live stream. We might get heart attack.
No, knock on wood. That's one of my fears. No, I'm just kidding.
But if that's our theme, then like that's hard to tolerate. And if it's not, we're tolerating it, right? Like there's a billion ways that anybody's life might get ruined. And essentially, as a human being, everyone has the inherent ability to tolerate basically everything. Even someone with OCD is able to tolerate 99.9% of all of the ways that their lives might get ruined, because there's just an infinite number of examples. Hit by a car, we could all have different diseases, et cetera, right? And the goal of the work in dealing with OCD is just to be able to relate to the theme the same way that we relate to every other fear that we experience, right? It's just that we have a broken alarm system, that the brain is making some irrelevant emotions, like a sense of dread, or the feeling that your gut is telling you that something's wrong, and this feeling of imperative kind of nature of needing to understand what the issue is and to gain some certainty right now. But we could understand again that OCD is just an intolerance of an awareness of uncertainty, and being able to treat our themes in that nature the same way that we do with every other fear. That's the way out of it. The other way that I would conceptualize it is just a mistrust in oneself, and that the OCD work is learning to reinvest trust in yourself, that you can perceive reality correctly, that you do have a gut or an intuition that is worth listening to. It's just kind of buried under all of those other noises and other distractions. But if you lived your life without trying to fearfully plan for the future and prevent things from happening, you are somebody who is capable of being in tune with your mind and your body and making the best choices for you in the given moment with the information that you have, and you don't need an extra layer of defense, right? Folks with OCD feel like everybody else in the world has this ability to perceive reality and to perceive themselves and to perceive threats or danger better than they do. And they're missing that part of their brain that just knows whether or not there's a threat, and need to kind of replace that missing part of the brain with obsessing and compulsing. And learning to trust that you don't need that added layer of defense and that you can inherently trust yourself is one of the main curative parts of this work.
You know, one of my clients once kind of drew their experience with OCD and what you were saying, Sam, about this like kind of loss of trust in self. They drew kind of like OCD as like this huge dragon, right? Like fire breathing dragon. And then they drew themselves as like this little figure with like a toothpick to fight it. And I was saying like, that's what OCD has conned you into over the years, is it's made you feel very small.
Yeah.
Lost the ability to think that you could like think on your feet, land on your feet, and be able to like maneuver things. Totally abandons your support system and your family that would support you during those times. And it makes whatever problems in front of you just feel so huge and big that your only option is to give in, or you'll be like covered in fire, right? Or eaten by the dragon. And I think that's part of what treatment is asking you to do, is say, look, you can trust yourself. OCD is not this like inhuman special ability to prevent bad things from happening. If anything, I always tell clients I can point out how their compulsions are actually making some of their core fears more likely to come true.
Right.
So my contamination clients are often sick because they're washing their hands. They have cuts on their hands. They're more susceptible to germs. They're isolating a lot. So when they go in public, now they don't have like their natural kind of immune strength. So they're getting sick easier. So perfectionism, right? They aren't turning in papers, or they're spending too long on projects that they're turning stuff late and actually getting worse grades and not passing. So all subtypes can always kind of lead back to that.
Yeah.
Tracy, I'm going to throw a separate question to you real quick from 1211 your time, Emilio. Amy says, I've moderated comments from people in groups who believe gender identity OCD is a sin. The hate is a bit much. Talk about like what happens when somebody feels like they can't even be accepted in their own OCD community because there may be people with different views that think like, hey, having that belief is a sin, or your identity is a sin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this really highlights the diversity of humans, all humans. We all have our own belief systems, things that drive us, things that motivate us, things that, dictate how we are in this world. And I think where the moderation, the necessary moderation, not that we can control other people, is in the acceptance and to just allow people to be who they are. So this sort of reminds me of, for instance, somebody says, well, this is a sin, and somebody has, like you were saying, scrupulosity or religious OCD, where one person's sin is another person's daily practice, and neither of those things are wrong. Where somebody, I don't know how, personally, I don't know how anyone with knowledge, real knowledge and facts about OCD could call any form of OCD a sin, because that would say mental health is a sin, because OCD is a mental health disorder. Are there certain, I don't know, things, religious things that people, I don't know, that say, mental health is a sin? Probably. I don't know who they are. I'm sorry. And I would call that a misunderstanding or a lack of education in that area. So again, just like there are religions that say people of the LGBTQIA plus community's existence or life choices or the way that they conduct their normal lives, just like everybody else, is a sin. And that's okay for people that believe that. And it's okay for the people that also live their lives this way. It's about how do we coexist together without having hate, without having judgment on other people. This is just, whether it's about gender identity, whether it's about religion, whether it's about what kind of food you should eat, whether you should be vegetarian or not. This comes up in so many spaces, and this is just, I'm with you. Less hate, more love. and it's unfortunate. Like if I wear this shirt to the, grocery store, for instance, it says born to love, it's a rainbow. People will probably make assumptions about me or my beliefs. Some people might think that some of the things that I support and love and believe in are sinful. And I respect that is your belief, but I would like you to keep it with yourself and the people in your community who support that as well, and stay out of the community of people where our love, joy, and support all exist. So that's sort of my hot take on that.
I love that. Preach, preach, preach. You know what? We're getting a lot of live questions. We have one about intrusive thoughts and sleep and groinal sensation. So I want to get to those. But before I do, Sam, I'm going to ask you, what can people, along with Alex Reynolds, who's an incredible human being and about to be a clinician, can't wait for her. We all lead the LGBTQIA plus SIG at the IOCDF. So for you, Sam, what can they expect if they want to join, and why should they join? And then Tracy, we have some exciting events coming up this Thursday and next Wednesday that I'd love for you to tell them about.
I think our community is really like the number one element, right? We have a great group of people, of recurring kind of attendees on a monthly basis, where we get together, and it's part bonding, part queer joy, and part like planning and advocacy and understanding, okay, so what do we want to do with these kind of challenges and these problems that we're noticing? There's so much to do nowadays. So whether you're looking to connect with other people, whether you're looking to get active and to see if there's some information, sharing your stories, bonding with others, any sort of like advocacy kind of efforts, I think that this has been a great place to do so. There's not many places where there's an intersection of the two identities of identifying as queer and having OCD. So to find other folks that have gone through both of those experiences, I think is really special.
Well said. And what do we got coming up, Tracy?
We have fun stuff and also serious stuff. But we like to, first of all, let's just say it right now, that we love Pride Month. We want to show up for Pride Month, and we want to show up all year round, 365 days a year, or however many days exist in your reality. We want this to be every single day. So just saying, we have sorts of things like this happen throughout the year, but this is what's happening this month in celebration of Pride. So Thursday, tomorrow, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern, we have an LGBTQIA plus special interest group, the one that Chris was just talking about. We're hosting a hangout, a virtual hangout. We're going to have games, scavenger hunt, super fun stuff. And it is a safe and supportive and joyful place for everybody who identifies with the community, as well as allies and supporters. Come celebrate with us. It's on the IOCDF's events calendar. For the link, you could also, if you wanted to, you could DM me at Taboo Tracy. I will give you the link. Aside from that, we also have next Wednesday, which is the 25th, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. One of our SIG members, Mike Vatter, is going to be hosting a Pride Month community discussion. So a community discussion, we can talk about serious stuff. You can talk about joyful stuff. You can talk about all kinds of stuff. Mike is somebody with lived experience who advocates in the community for the LGBTQI plus community and OCD and the intersection between those two things. So we hope to see you there. And that is also found on the IOCDF event calendar.
Yes, and make sure to go to special interest groups on the IOCDF website. Obviously, there's the LGBTQIA plus SIG, but there's also perinatal OCD for new parents that are really struggling with OCD. There's people that, if you're interested in OCD and autism, there's all kinds of different groups. So make sure to join. Also look out for a couple blogs that we as a SIG are putting out. We just submitted one on what clinicians can learn to be more affirming for their clients, but also to represent the thoughts and the needs of the OCD and queer community. I wanted to throw a question out from Kay at 10:07 Eastern time. They say, what is the number one thing I should do when obsessions are hard and won't let go? And then they ask, should they sleep, like as a response. So when somebody's obsessions are just hitting them really hard, what is the best way to approach and to address that?
Well, you want to take this one, Sam?
I'm happy to take it. Two things. One, I could quickly answer that question more directly. No, I'm going to answer it indirectly first, because I think the indirect answer is the more important one. I think that the question of when my OCD is so bad, what do I do, is a misdirect when it comes to the work that we're doing, because honestly, like, I can give like tips and tricks of, there's different things. There's grounding, there's breathing exercise, there's like something called a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you look at 5 things you could see, 4 things you could feel, 3 things you could hear, 2 things you could feel, 1 thing you could smell. Maybe I messed up that order. There's engaging in activities. There's some like DBT kind of exercises of intense exercise to try to tire yourself out. There's the ACT kind of element of going into valued activities. There's depending on the theoretical model, there's a lot of different options and a lot of different tools, most of which the spirit of the law is based around, grounding yourself in the present moment. And that said, I think that effective treatment, like at that point that you're already at a 10 out of 10, frankly, it's just hard to get out of that. And any of the tools that I mentioned, no matter how much you practice, I don't frankly believe that there's a real guarantee of a high success rate of pulling yourself out very quickly and very effectively from 10 out of 10s. They just suck, and it's really tough. That said, the goal of treatment is to recognize what ramps you up to those 10 out of 10s and prevent yourself from adding fuel to the fire in the first place. Because I guarantee you that 10 out of 10 didn't come from nowhere. Even if you were quickly triggered, if you track like the few seconds until you got up to the 10 out of 10, or the minute before you got up to the 10 out of 10, it probably started at a 7, and there's something that you did to amplify it from that 7 to a 10. But usually it's a little longer than that. There's something in your head, and then over the course of a few hours, it goes from a 5 to a 6 to a 7 to an 8 to a 9 to a 10, right? So I think the real effective treatment is understanding when you're experiencing those initial challenges and those initial urges to compulse, how do you, notice it really quickly of, this background process, or this process that's so automatic at this point is happening again. How do you cut off the fuel source as fast as possible to prevent it from getting there? Because on its own, organically, OCD doesn't just come as a out of nowhere 10 out of 10 experience. It'll usually organically peak somewhere at like a 7, and it's our compulsing that brings it from that 7 to that 10.
I love that you said that, because I think if OCD had like a marketing team, one of the best things that it's at marketing is when you're at that 7 out of 10, it's like, hey, do these compulsions and you'll go down to a 2. But
Right.
that's really not what happens. Is like the engagement. Like I always say, like actually it was Shiva Raji when I spoke with her, and now I told her I was going to borrow it. But when OCD is giving you that monologue, we're just trying to not dialogue with it. And I think sometimes we don't recognize our contribution in the form of compulsions is actually making that 7 turn into a 10. Like you're saying, Sam, I think OCD unfortunately markets itself as like, hey, do the thing I'm asking you to do, and that 7 will become a 2 in no time. Sometimes it works, but there's a lot of times you do the compulsions and it makes it so much worse.
Absolutely.
So much worse.
Oh yeah. And I think too, just thinking about this, because everybody gets, we have something called memory retrieval. So even when you're like me, 20 years deep into your ERP recovery process, every once in a while, just out of nowhere, it's like bang. And I'm like, whoa, that's a hard chemical reaction that is extreme, and I am frozen. I don't even freeze anymore. But like that happened like once in the last 5 years. And I froze, and I was like, and I was frozen in a bathroom and I couldn't move. And then I was like, oh yeah, the most important thing you learned in your recovery journey is not to make this important. And so my body was physically frozen. I was at a salon getting my hair done, by the way. I was in the bathroom. I walk in, I see there's no paper towels. I don't even use them to compulse anymore. Irrelevant. I froze. I was like 9 out of 10, and I couldn't move my body. And then I was just like, and then I shook my head, and I was like, I love this for me. I love this. For me, even though my body was feeling that sort of, like you said, sleep is you're trying to escape it. And instead, I just sort of leaned into it. And I did like a little groovy dance in my bathroom stall for a second, even though I felt like complete crap. And then I just moved through the day and went back, and it naturally dropped. So the radical acceptance that you're going to feel uncomfortable, and the radical acceptance that there is no reason for you to need to escape it. Don't try to figure out how to escape it. It always comes down with time. When have you ever felt triggered and then became permanently untriggered with anxiety? Nobody's ever done that. It's never happened. Okay, I said that, and like one person in the world had some off thing, but hey, most likely it's never happened. There you go. That's more certain.
I always say delay. Whatever you're feeling is going to go away if you just engage forward without OCD being kind of in your ear telling you what to do. We have a question from Wes on YouTube at 12. Oh, wait, I'm so bad at 11:30 Eastern time. So bad at the time zone. Hey, thanks for doing these. Can you speak on the groinal sensations and the reason why it feels like it's real or wanting the thoughts? Thank you. So a lot of times, just for some backstory for those watching that aren't familiar, a lot of times with OCD, it can also bring on physical sensations. So sometimes when people have certain intrusive sexual thoughts about any group of people they don't want to have thoughts about, sometimes they'll get like a groinal sensation or some kind of physical sensation in different aspects of their body, sometimes private areas. And a lot of times OCD wants to sort of like connect it and give meaning. So what, can you both kind of weigh in on this and why it feels real?
It's one of my favorite things to talk about, why it feels real. We won't get all super deep, but there's arousal non-concordance, which, long story short, it's your mind and body are doing two different things. So I'm not into this, but my crotch says I am, or oppositely, the same can happen. I'm super into this moment with my whoever I'm doing this with, but maybe my body isn't responding the way I'd like it to. Those are both arousal non-concordance. It goes both ways. And OCD, I love to say, it takes puzzle pieces from two different puzzles, and it's like, these go together and this means something. So it's like, you had a whatever genital response. Sometimes people freak out because they're like, I know, but it was whatever, an erection, but there was a drip, but something happened, but I was orgasming at the time when it happened, but something, but doesn't matter. Didn't add importance to it. Not irrelevant. We get bodily responses. People just don't talk about that intrusion a lot, but we get intrusive thoughts, images, feelings, urges. You can get intrusive smells. I get those sometimes. All kinds of stuff that people don't know about. And the biggest thing you can do is not make a big deal about it. The more you focus on it, the more it's happening, right? So if I feel something in my genitals and I have OCD, maybe it's going to pair it with, but the ice cream truck went by and two children were standing there. Let's just say that's what it was. Or I was looking at breasts on a person at the grocery store. Does that mean something? And, whatever it is. And what it really just means is that good news, you have blood flow and your body works. And I'm excited for you. And, pat yourself on the back and keep shopping. So.
One thing I always remind people too is when they're saying but to me in session, right? Like you're kind of saying but I start to say, I'm like, oh, I didn't know I was talking to OCD's mouthpiece. I'm like, are you the OCD representative? Because you are in this session right now trying to convince me and yourself that OCD is right. But let me ask you something. If you go up to somebody without OCD and say, hey, did you hit somebody with their car? They're like, no. Right? They don't have this whole, they're not trying to convince us of anything. They're just pretty firm. We're trying to build back that confidence in what you know. And if you're butting me to death where you're trying so hard to haggle with me, fine, you hit everybody on the way here. What do you want us to do? Right? But it's that but. So I always tell people, if you're being the butt police, there's clearly, something going on. I know none of us are psychiatrists, but I think this is still a question we could answer. at 12:15, Sadui on YouTube says, how to handle OCD medication side effects. So when we have clients and they're going through medication, maybe they're having side effects, obviously they should definitely talk to their prescriber and really work on that. But sometimes our clients come to us and they're complaining, maybe it's affecting their sex life and it's really hurting their relationships. Like, how can clinicians, what are some things that we can offer people going through side effects? It's just kind of some reminders while they're kind of waiting them out.
Yeah, the waiting them out, and again, not a psychiatrist, and echoing that the first thing to do is talk to your psychiatrist, because there's a lot of different options, and finding the right medication is kind of like you date around a little bit and you see what the pros and cons are, and you see if the pros outweigh the cons, and you make an informed decision based off of that. I think that part of it is also that a lot of times the side effects come first, and then the benefits come second, and the side effects fade first, and the benefits stay. And that's a big trajectory of like adjusting in that like 4 to 6 week period of getting onto medication. And then I will also say that a lot of times medication is used in adjunct with therapy. And the way that I like to conceptualize it is almost like if you're prescribed steroids when you're doing physical therapy for like muscle recovery, right? Like these steroids can help amplify and make it easier for you to do the exercises that you're doing. But it's the exercises that are really going to kind of make the longer lasting change. And then you could get off the steroids sometimes when you've created those muscles. So a lot of times medications, for some people, it's a permanent kind of part of their life, and it really just helps balance out their brain. And for other people, it is something that helps them, give them a little boost in their ability to do the therapeutic work. And then when they've kind of changed their lives and learned the therapeutic skills, they can start to titrate off of the medication, again, with collaboration of their psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Advocate.
Collaboration.
Advocate. I'm putting on my sex therapist hat for a minute. Advocate for yourself. There are medications that have less sexual side effects than others sometimes. Not always, but advocate. Tell your doctor. It can feel embarrassing, but you know what? It doesn't have to be. It's a real quality of life issue. Always, if something's going on, talk to them about it, and then we'll figure it out from there, right? So,
yeah, I just did an event with Adam Frank, who is a psychiatrist at USC, and just like you were saying, Tracy, there's medications that are known to have less of the side effect you may experience, whether it's weight gain, weight loss, insomnia. So definitely talk to your prescriber about that. Nikki, who's a good friend of the stream from Ireland, has COVID, so please feel better. Miss Up from YouTube at 1219 says, any idea on BDD specific therapists? It seems to be unheard of here. If you go to iocdf.org/find-help and put in your area, your zip code, your state, your country, it will show you providers. And I believe one of the specialties you could click is BDD, and just make sure that they're trained in that. Additionally, the IOCDF actually has a BDD website. So it's bdd.iocdf.org. And then we just recently had the BDD online conference. We collaborated with the BDD Foundation in the UK. And so people can still register to see the different presentations. And a lot of the presenters there specialize in BDD. I want to throw both of you. This question comes from Twitch. I always have to remember which icon, not LinkedIn, Twitch. She says, or they say, let's say someone is doing rituals, so getting dressed or brushing their hair, and if they feel like they're not doing it right, so they have just right OCD, they pair it up like somebody may get harmed. They've done exposures like scripts on family dying and it's improved. However, they are still counting randomly. They try to slow down their thinking to see if it's associated with a thought, and it doesn't seem to be. It feels like a habit now to count stuff. When they notice themselves, they can stop. But if they keep noticing and stop themselves, will the counting stop? So I'll sum it up. So a lot of times people have just right OCD, and sometimes it's paired with I call it kind of like a magical thinking flare. It's like, if I don't do this just right, someone will get hurt. But it sounds like one of the habits now that has kind of come in is like counting things, and they feel like it's automatic. So if somebody's counting automatic in general, like what are some tools that they can stop? Like kind of those rituals that I think people will say, like, it's kind of habit now, I just sort of do it, it's kind of just become part of my day. What's like a tactic that they can use?
Yeah, at that point, I would say that you don't really need to stop it, right? I count a compulsion as you are compulsing if you are aware of, okay, I can make a choice right now, and you choose something intentionally in order to reduce distress or reduce a sense of uncertainty, right? If your brain is automatically doing something in the background, I wouldn't count it as a compulsion. And in fact, I think trying to stop it would be the compulsion, right? I must have had some counting compulsion like OCD as a child. I have vague memories of it, but like this echo of it is that whenever I'm doing something, like my brain automatically counts it. I started working with like a personal trainer, and whenever he's having us do exercise or something, we'll be kind of talking while I'm doing reps, and then he'll be like, okay, yeah, I think that's 10. I'm like, no, we're at 8. Like, and I was having a conversation the whole time with him, but just I have an automatic counting system in the back of my head. I'm not intentionally trying to count it, but my brain just counts things forever at this point. So it's not an issue, right? It's only an issue if you are concerned around it and if you're trying to change it. But with OCD, it's always so important to understand the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law, right? Things that can seem compulsive could be totally fine. Things that can seem therapeutic could be totally compulsive. It's really about just allowing your brain to do whatever it wants, describing a relevance, like learning that you have agency to empower whatever it is, and choosing skillfully. So it sounds like you're doing everything right.
Yes, yes. And it happens with things outside of counting. For me, since I was a kid, I would read things forward, backward, and then forward again to make it just right. And I can't stop it. When I go to stop signs, my brain goes stop, pot, stop. I don't try to stop it. It's just part of my life. So it can happen with counting, other sort of mental ritual sort of things. Just leave it there, right? It's not hurting you. It's not taking up any extra time.
Yeah.
Terry Blessing said, how can I find out about different OCD subtypes? I just sent Emilio a link for the IOCDF website, and that is a link. You can see all the subtypes. All right, I'm looking at the time, so I want to give each of you one last question. So I'm going to give you Sam. Alex D at 1223 says, for those with OCD, how do you know what's true and what's not? How can you know for sure?
It's a great question, because the answer is no. You cannot know for sure. That's exactly what I was talking about before. You can't know anything for sure. If I say this is my right hand, you don't know if this image is mirrored. You don't know if we're all dreaming. You don't know if this is like a hallucination, right? There's no statement in the world that anybody could make that wouldn't have a but what if that could follow up afterwards, right? So the fact is that you already don't know anything for sure, and you're okay with not knowing everything else other than whatever topic you're obsessed around right now, for sure, right? And our goal is to establish a relationship with the themes the same way that you are relating to everything else. That's grieving the loss of the fantasy that we can know for sure, right? OCD says if you think enough, then you can gain certainty, and once you gain certainty, you will live happily ever after. Yeah. And part of this work is grieving the loss of that fantasy and understanding that it is impossible to achieve certainty. It is impossible to feel perfect forever. And that to live and to be a human being means to be constantly exposed to an infinite amount of things that can go wrong. And that is the nature of reality for you and for everyone, and has been for all time, right? So learning to deal with OCD is reinvesting faith and trust in ourselves and our ability to navigate real life issues as they present to us in the moment, and tolerating the uncertainty and giving up the extra layer of defense of trying to prevent anything from happening. That perceived fragility of I need to guarantee a perfect environmental circumstance in order to be okay, and divesting from that narrative and investing in ourselves of I will be okay regardless of whatever normative life challenges pop up, and I think that I can deal with things as they pop up instead of trying to prevent anything bad from happening in the future.
Well said. And then final question to you, Tracy. Sunny N at 1245 says, why does OCD keep coming back? How does it get resolved?
Oh, yes. Okay. So not so fun fact, also known as This is actually 100% certainty I'm about to give you right here. Rarely do you get this. OCD keeps coming back because OCD is not curable, it's manageable. You may be somebody like Sam or other people who get a break, who get maybe even time that you feel like it's not even in your life. That could happen for various lengths of time, or you could be like me and you hear it all the time. The importance is exactly sort of what Sam was talking about earlier, which is there's nothing to be resolved. OCD is telling you there's something to be resolved. There is nothing to be resolved. It is known as the doubting disorder because it has intrusive doubt that is never ending. So even if you resolved, if I gave you exact certainty, I do this with some of my clients sometimes. I say, I'm going to give you 100% certainty about this right now. I'm like, wait, let's see how long before that expires. It will always expire. You will never have it resolved. It will be like you didn't say all the right facts so that you didn't get the right answer. You might have blacked out so you don't know about this thing that affects your life that's different. So the way you resolve it is by realizing it's not resolvable and accepting the fact that we can learn awesome tools to manage it, and you can have an awesome life where it's in the background. And the radical acceptance, there is nothing to be resolved. It's just a broken alarm. And if you could see it, you would know it. If this was an alarm and it was screaming at me and it was like, you're going to jump off the balcony, I'd be like, this is the stupidest broken alarm and I'm going to throw it in the trash. With OCD, it lives in our brain. So it goes off and we can't throw it away. So that's sort of the answer for that one.
All right, love it. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody who attended today. There was so much good chatter in the chat. There was people supporting each other, a lot of really good questions. Zach M, happy Pride to you as well. My final thought is just basically like to, everyone out there, Pride Month is just an opportunity to say, hey, there are people out there in our community that love different and identify different, but they're amazing people. So thank you to those out there as well as our allies. We really appreciate it. And please check out the LGBTQIA plus SIG. All of the three of us plus Alex welcome you. The only real announcement is we'll be back here next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern for another live stream. Please join us and come see us in Chicago if you can make it. The second weekend of July, the three of us will be there. We would love to see you at OCD Con. And there's also a hybrid option. So if you'd like to join us hybrid, you can as well. But take care. But a big, big shout out and special thanks to my guests, Tracy and Sam. Really appreciate it. What is your 3-word goodbye to everybody to have them feel inspired to kick OCD's butt today?
Love unconditionally and be accepting. That's more than
and I'm saying you can trust yourself. It's buried underneath, but you can trust yourself.
And I'll just say OCD sucks. All right. Take care, everyone. IOCDF.org for all your OCD needs. Take care, and we'll see you back next week. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Sam.
Bye.